Welcome back. We're just picking up in our second video in installing pfBlocker. In our first video, we talked about what it is and talked about some resources for it and talked about doing a snapshot of our pf1 virtual and also doing a backup. I'm in my Windows 10 machine. You of course could do this from any of your machines with a web browser inside CorpNet or DevNet. But we left off in video number 1 right here. And where this is we installed the package and then went to Firewall and pfBlocker, and it immediately brings up the wizard for the first run. If we don't want to use the wizard, we could exit it right here, but we do want to use the wizard. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I also have on hand with me, I have my MaxMind key. And let me just be sure I've got that available because I'll show you where to input that. Okay. This wizard here just asks a few questions. And again, this is a pretty big deal. In my opinion, this is one of the more important things that pfSense could be deployed to do. And I want to go through this with you at a slow enough pace that you can see and read and follow along with me. Okay. Caution, before proceeding, the pfBlockerNG wizard will configure a default setup of pfBlockerNG. The default setup does not include the GeoIP filtering. It doesn't include some of the other options, but it does some basic ad filtering, and it's actually quite good. Okay. Bullet number 2, the default configuration entry-level setup, which is designed to assist beginners of pfBlockerNG. Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, I appreciate having some pre-configuration. Bullet number 3, if you have previously configured pfBlocker, all settings will be wiped. Let's talk about this for a minute. We're running the wizard, and the wizard does, you can run the wizard after you've installed pfBlocker. Like, I'm going to do this at home. I've been learning and revisiting my skills with pfBlocker, and I want to redo my configuration at home. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to back up my pfSense at home, and then I'm just going to come into to pfBlocker and rerun the wizard. If you just uninstall and reinstall pfSense, it keeps your past configuration. Excuse me. If you just uninstall and reinstall pfBlocker, there's a checkbox that's checked. I believe it's checked by default. It keeps your past configurations. Let me just make a note to myself to show that to you. And so that's a little bit of a challenge. Like, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll uninstall something and then reinstall it with the idea that we're starting fresh again. Not the case with pfBlockerNG. If you uninstall the package or update the package and reinstall the package, you'll most likely get all of the past configurations. However, if you run the wizard will start fresh. It'll start from scratch, and it's nice. You don't have to uninstall the package to run the wizard. I'll show you when we're done here. I'll show you where you can just run the wizard. Okay, that's bullet number 3. 2 components will be installed. Bullet number 4. IP firewall rules will be added to your outbound interface to block from the worst offenders, and then DNS blacklisting. We'll talk about this in more detail when I do a separate video on the DNS. Sometimes DNS, it's called DNSBL. Some people refer to it as DNS, and it blocklisting. Excuse me, blocklisting or blacklisting. I often think of it as DNS blacklisting, where we've got a blacklist of sites that we're not going to allow. Now, I'll just tell you right away that truly this is DNS. Everything that we've learned about DNS, right? Name resolution, name to IP. What this service is, I just want to briefly mention this to you, is you set your users to, in their path for name resolution for DNS, have it go through pfSense. So like in our case, we've got DC1 hosting DNS. What we would do is we would set DC1 as a forwarder to PF1, and by doing so, then we can utilize the block list or blacklisting feature of pfBlocker to filter non-desirable websites. Okay, I know you got to think about that a little bit. That is an important thing, but I mention it now, and I'll mention it again when we do a video on how to configure and enable and how to manage your block lists, your blacklists. Okay. Next screen here, we're on 2 of 4. As I mentioned, it's a very short wizard here. Select the inbound. In other words, it's going to create some firewall rules, and what is the hostile world and what is the protected world. And so for us, the hostile world is WAN, and the protected world, I'm going to go ahead and include my OpenVPN connections. This can be changed later. This isn't a permanent thing that you have to like start over to change. You can change this later. Okay, so here is the where the firewall rules will be stopping content coming in from on inbound, and also we can enable features in pfBlocker to filter outbound content to stop our users from going to malicious sites or ad type following tracking sites. Okay, this deserves a little bit of an explanation. When a web request, okay, let's back up. I'm on Windows 10. When on Windows 10 or somebody inside your network, whoever they are, when they want to go to a site that has been identified as being malicious or that we're choosing to block, what'll happen is their web browser will be redirected to this URL or this IP address. It's you can put whatever you want to in there. You just don't want it to be something that's actually being used for this customer. Okay, if you're deploying this on a network that's using 10.10.10, then just make it 10.0.0.1. It just has to be something that's not part of your normal corporate network. We are fully IPv4 and IPv6, so we are going to check this box here to enable DNSBL for IPv6. Does that make sense? Everybody got that here? What you'll see happen is when a site is denied, is it creates a one pixel picture that is delivered from this address, and so in the web bar, the bar up here at the top of a web browser, you won't, it's actually just 1 pixel. Okay, anyways, you'll see this address there. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So let's say that you wanted to, I'm going to just run with this a little bit more. You're doing this for a customer. Okay, now for home user, I know exactly when I see that box what it is. For site, I know exactly what that box is. But let's say you're doing it for a customer. I in the early days of doing this, I did for a customer. And what we did is we had a web page that was delivered. So in other words, we changed this to an internal web server's address that had a default web page that said, the content you are trying to access has been deemed inappropriate. If you feel this is an error, please contact your system administrator, and then it gave an email address, a name and an email address, even a phone number. So it's that kind of thing, and that would I think for like a customer, that might be pretty handy to do. But you all inside here, you've been using this, and I bet you haven't even noticed it. Yeah, because most of the stuff that we try to go to or we go to that gets blocked is all obscured. It's just ad tracking and things like that. Okay, 3 of 4, and then here we are on 4 of 4. Okay, all configuration parameters have been successfully collected. Okay, there's just a couple other things I want to show you here, and then I'll wrap up this video and we'll move into some very specific configurations for it. All right. What it's done now, okay, I kind of, all of us, let's take a breath. Okay, so we're done with the wizard, and now it dropped us off here at Firewall pfBlocker update. Okay, why did it do that? Well, it's going to pull, in fact, you can see it is pulling. It's pulling down blacklist information. It's doing that automatically. There are some default blacklists, and it's going after them. Okay, because malicious activity on the internet is ever changing, this update service will run every so many hours or so many days. We'll have to see what the current default setting is, but it needs to run. It needs to run on a schedule so that in a few days from now, there will be new content that needs to be screened that wasn't identified today, and that's why this needs constant update. Okay, pfBlocker has successfully configured and updated. Okay, I'm not going to read all that for you, but I'm describing it to you. So here's the deal. When you and I do anything anything is a broad term, but when you and I work with security stuff like this, pfBlocker, we have to understand that you can't just deploy this and walk away. Now, pfBlocker is not, you don't have to tinker with it every day, but it's not the kind of thing that can be just left on its own. We need to know that it's getting its updates. We may need to make some adjustments to it. You guys have seen the uh, the teeter-totter thing where we've got security on one side and we've got user convenience on the other side. You can't have both. If you're going to have high security, then it's going to be inconvenient. And so the more convenient it is, the less secure it is. It's always a trade-off. How often do I have to tweak these at home or at NIC? I would say on average about once every 2 weeks. Think, well, what kind of things prompt that? Let's see. The last one at home was that from Amazon Prime, we could not play Prime Video. We could not play psych episodes. So you could go to Amazon Prime if we have a Fire Stick at home, an Amazon Fire Stick. You bring up the Fire Stick, you go to Prime Video, and you go to play Psych as an older, I guess it was a TV show, and you go to play old episodes, and it wasn't able to connect. Also, old Chuck episodes. If you've ever seen Chuck, Chuck works for. It's kind of a play on Best Buy. He works for the Geek Squad, so to speak. It wouldn't play those, and so what I have to do is I have to come in here and I have to look at why. Well, first of all, I turned it off and I saw it would play it. I didn't turn off pfSense. I just turned off pfBlocker. I saw it would play it, and so then I turned pfBlocker back on and I see that it's blocked. And so you have to come in here and make adjustments. Here on our main campus, there are some links that come out in some of the NIC email news that refer to a tracking site. So NIC uses web tracking to, I guess, know how many people are viewing these PDF documents with web links that they send out to employees. And pfBlocker flagged that as being tracking. And so I had to go in the logs and look and see what the tracking site was. And then I had to go and enable it. And so I would say on average about every 2 weeks. That's why I believe you could build a career out of it. One of our family members, I deployed this for one of our family members, and they were having trouble streaming Pandora. And so you have to go in and figure out why. Why was it having trouble streaming Pandora? And they were streaming the free version of Pandora, which has the built-in ads in it, and the ads were being flagged. Okay, so you get the idea? Okay, a couple more things and we'll wrap up this video. Okay, all right, so the update, when you make changes to pfBlocker, then you just have to keep in mind to come in here and run the update. The update does two things. It goes and checks for updated databases for GeoIP and for any block or blacklisting, and it also will reload your configuration if you've made configuration changes for pfBlocker. Okay, a couple things to then show you. On the General tab, okay, again, we got to take a breath, right? Okay, changing gears here. All right, earlier I mentioned to you that when you uninstall and reinstall pfBlocker, it will keep your old configuration, and that's this checkbox right here. If you don't want that, if you want to start from scratch, one of the things you could do is you could uncheck the box, uninstall it, and then reinstall it. Also, you could run the wizard again. Okay, you think, well, how do you do that? The wizard, to run the wizard, is over here. Okay, you click on that and it'll run the wizard again. Right, we're good? Okay. The other thing that I want to show you is that max mind key. Where do you go put that in? All right, so we first of all, just a reminder, Firewall pfBlocker. So everything we're looking at is Firewall pfBlocker. It's also noted here up on the top, Firewall pfBlocker. And we go to the IP tab, and we scroll down here and it says Maxmind's GeoIP configuration. It tells us a little bit about it here, that we have to get a key. To utilize the Maxmind GeoIP functionality, you must first register for a free Maxmind user account. Visit the following links to register for an account. Okay. All right, so I've got my account and I'm going to paste that in here. I don't know if I think it would show on the screen, so I probably shouldn't do that. So I'll wait. When I end the video, I'll paste it and then I'll save it. Okay. Here is where I mentioned that if you change your mind, say you don't want filtering on VPN connections, then uncheck this box. Now I got to tell you, there is sometimes where this is obnoxious, inconvenient. And again, that thing about security, about the more secure it is, the less convenient it is. Okay, but you'll see this as we go. And so you have to decide. You have to decide how much security, how much convenience for you or for your customers. Okay, so we are done with the install here. Let me just show you one other thing. I want to show you here that we've got pfBlocker here. Notice that. Okay, pfBlocker DNSBL, pfBlocker Firewall. Let's go see if it did any rules for us. So we go to Firewall Rules. Okay, notice we've got multiple interfaces now. We've got floating rules, which we haven't talked about. Those are rules that apply to multiple interfaces. We have our WAN rule. Okay, nothing there for pfBlocker. We go to CorpNet, and there's the first pfBlocker rule right there. pfBlocker, and you hover over it. So this is the current blacklisting rule, and notice it's at the top, and this is for outbound traffic. So what we're saying then is that if users are, if they're attempting to communicate, if something the user does, something from these internal networks is attempting to communicate out to something that's on the blacklist, that the replies from those will be blocked. Okay, and then Openvpn, we see the same there. We see that same list. And again, these are all the IP addresses. You see, it's a pretty long list. Notice my scroll bar over here. I haven't even scrolled on. Okay, yeah, lots of places that on the internet that present what are considered malicious activity. Okay, so I think we've overviewed it pretty well, and I'll wrap up this video. And when we come back in, the first thing that we'll look at is we'll take a look at the blacklists and the default ones, and then how you might update those or add your own. There are some categories that one category particularly that I think that for some customers you'll want to add, and that's one for pornography or adult content. Most of the categories in there right now are for ad removal and for tracking, and so I often add one for pornography that I get from a source called Stephen Black. That's actually his name, Stephen Black, Blacklist. Okay, all right. Let me wrap up this video, and where will we pick up next? We'll pick up. Let's go here, and we'll pick up right here on DNSBL. Okay, I'll see you in a bit.